do is include the policy meeting and then include the final presentation that we were going to have into the business meeting during the research section. So
if there's nothing else for the policy meeting, anybody have anything else for the policy meeting? Then we will adjourn the policy meeting and transition to the business meeting.
switch section, right? Just around.
Pick it all camera.
Ask how you use some protection.
So get me in a place I'm starting a new file.
All right, good afternoon. We're gonna go ahead and transition into our business meeting. Just doing a quick attendance acknowledgement. So we have myself, District Attorney Bible, Attorney Balkovic, Judge Daly, joined by Senator Langerholk, Judge McDermott, and Professor Rago, as well as Chairman Fox, and also Ranowitz with the Department of Corrections.
We also have Representative Bonner
Yes.
and Senator Street.
That's right, okay, and online we have Representative Bonner and Senator Street. Rico. Yep, yeah, I got Rico. We have all of our legislative members, that's great. Okay, next, we will approve the minutes of our previous commission meeting. Beautiful. In favor? Aye. All vote. Okay, and then, I know, oh, I see, switch around, yep. Is there anyone online, waiting for public comment?
Carly, Mr. Chair, what you say?
Senator, I was just asking if there's anyone in the public that was online for public comment, but it seems like there is not.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, all right. Well, with that and the approval of minutes, I think we can go ahead and move into executive.
Great, thank you, Chairman. We are coming to the end of the current term of all appointed commission members. The current terms run from October 1st, 2023. October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2025. So I've made requesting to all the appointing authorities for reappointment or for new members when appropriate. And instead of reading off all this list, on page 8 of the notebook material are the various appointing authorities and which members, when their initial selection date was. The current term again is October 1st to September 30th, 2025, and the various current members. We've been notified that 2 current commission members will be leaving the commission at the end of this term. That's both Judge McLaughlin and Judge McDermott. And I will turn it to the chair to say a few words, but I'll also note that we have these big plaques for members who will be leaving.
This Sierra's judge. It's real nice. You don't have to.
I do. They're zeroing in on it. Thank you.
You got to come to State College to pick it up though.
Well,
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Matt. And yeah, it's I really have appreciated the opportunity to serve with both Judge McLaughlin and Judge McDermott, particularly Judge McDermott also, being in Philadelphia. I've really appreciated being able to talk with you, hear your experience and collaborate on the commission. Judge McDermott was appointed to the commission on October 2022. She served on the commission's Research and Data Analysis Committee. And she is gratefully going to be enjoying her free time because she will be retiring. So congratulations as well, Judge McDermott.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity and I appreciated that the Chief Justice appointed me. And, you know, but for retirement, you guys would have never gotten rid of me because I would have campaigned to stay on forever. So I have learned a lot, but one of the things that I have reluctantly learned is that sometimes it's time to pass the torch. And that part of our responsibility as we get, let's say, older is that we have to train and give other judges in particular opportunities to, you know, grow themselves and quite frankly, to offer a different perspective. And I'm hopeful, well, I believe I know my replacement, and I think that the commission will be in a better place before it. So I just want to thank everyone. I got an opportunity to know the staff when we went to Lake Tahoe. I certainly appreciated that. I also got to know some of my colleagues, my judicial colleagues better. And then other people like Professor Rago and, you know, everyone that was affiliated with, or is still affiliated with the commission, the staff, everyone has been great. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Judge, and thank you for your service on the commission. And as mentioned as well, Judge McLaughlin will be transitioning out of the commission. She was appointed in October 2023 by the President Judge. She served on the commission's Education Outreach Committee and has also participated in the in the Villanova workshop. So we are sorry to see Judge McLaughlin go, but we appreciate her time on the commission as well. And with that, I will pass it back over to Matt.
Great, thank you. And I just want to echo and thank both judges for their service on the commission. It was, staff really appreciated the partnership we had with the members, but also the friendship we created with them and their continued support. So I wish them both luck as they move forward. So just a quick announcement on the appointments. We're still waiting on a number of appointments. We received to date 3 reappointments and 2 new appointments. So Representative Bonner has been reappointed by the House Majority Leader, Judge Daly by the Chief Justice, Professor Rago by the Chief Justice, and 2 new members replacing our outgoing members. Judge Natasha Taylor Smith from Philadelphia was appointed by the Chief Justice, and Judge Megan McCarthy King was appointed by the President Judge of the Superior Court. And so I'll be reaching out in the coming days or weeks to the appointing authorities, reminding them about the expiration of the terms. But I think it's important just to note that in our bylaws, the members of the commission shall serve terms of 2 years, and until a successor has been selected and qualified, a vacancy on the commission shall be filled for the balance of the term. So we will still be able to have a quorum and move forward as long as members are willing to continue to serve. Even when their official term expires, it will continue. So again, I'll be reaching out to the different appointing authorities and hopefully expediting that process of reappointments or new appointments to those positions. Moving on to the next item on the executive update is commission staff. I indicated earlier that we are now at 18 full-time equivalent staff. We had a staff member resign during this period. One of our administrative assistants here in the office, Christy Lose, who started with us, has been with the commission for roughly 2 years. Given our budgetary challenges, we've decided to leave that position vacant for the near term. And that leaves us with 4 vacancies. And I'll just go through them briefly. We're actually down 2 administrative assistants, one here in this office and one in our Harrisburg office. We're down an individual in Bobby's unit in the education and outreach specialist. And then we're down an individual whose title is a full stack developer, basically a programmer in the applications information technology unit. I think we've had a lot of discussions about the applications and information technology unit about offsetting that by using some consultants that we've hired. Be one of our action items later about continuing our work with them, not just because of the vacancy, but because of the vacancy in from the firm that we had contracted with to work on that project that we terminated contract with. So that's our current setup. Again, we're stretched a little thin, and my appreciation to staff for really taking on additional responsibilities and working very hard to make sure we meet all the diverse mandates and challenges and responsibilities that we have. All right, moving on now to commission operations. And oh, thank you. Blew right by our agency updates, so thank you, Ryan. So excited to talk about our vacancies, I guess. So I'll start with Chairman Fox.
Just nothing earth shattering to report. I did want to thank the commission, especially Ryan, the commission staff. We had an issue for our revocation guidelines. We had to make an assessment as to what the new conviction, what that OGS score was. We had trouble gathering that information, and they helped us, the commission helped us sort of break through some of the barriers so that it's going to be a much easier solution. And now we'll be able to correctly apply the revocation ranges for revocation. So that was a huge help that the staff helped us with. I want to make sure the commission members were aware of that. I think it's nothing, like I say, nothing earth shattering, but we are starting to look at some things. We've reached out in an exploratory nature to the governor's office, who's supporting us to sort of explore what we can do with artificial intelligence to help us gather and put information together that would help us in our parole assessments. So this is going to be that is sort of earth shattering as it moves forward, but nothing like it's exploratory at this point. But I think that's something that I'll certainly keep you advised of as we move through. And that's about it, other than to say, again, it was really nice to meet and to get to know Judge McDermott. So congratulations on your retirement.
Great, thank you, Chairman. I'll now turn it over to Deputy Secretary Winarowitz.
The secretary passes on her regards. She couldn't make it today. Just one update for folks that are familiar with our little Scandinavia unit that we have down at SCI Chester. We're in the process now of expanding that pilot to other state correctional institutions. So we're looking to pilot a little Scandinavia project at SCI Fayette, SCI Smithfield, and SCI Cambridge Springs, which is one of our female facilities. For most of you folks that know Brett Buckland in our shop, we are looking for research partners for those facilities. It'd be nice if we could get Penn State for SCI Smithfield to have a partnership with them. So I know Brett's been working on that. We're looking to get those units up and running either late spring or early summer at the latest. That's all I have for DOC.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Ryan, for getting me on track here. So from the commission's operation perspective, I think it's important right now to talk about the commission's budget and where we sit in relation to our funding. So before we just begin and take a look at what monies we have left, the commission is obviously an agency of the General Assembly, and we're affiliated with Pennsylvania State University. Unlike other legislative agencies and legislative staff, since 1981, the commission has contracted with Penn State University for administrative and personnel support. And commission personnel are hired through the university and employees of Penn State and contracted to work exclusively for the commission. And I point that out because state employees are covered under Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which mandates that state employees receive their paychecks during a budget impasse. And that also prevents furloughs. Commission staff, because we're Penn State employees, even though we're a legislative agency, are not under that umbrella of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So what we have in reserves is what we have left to keep the lights on and the operations running. And so let me ask Brian to the next slide and go through.
Didn't show, but I'll get it for you.
Okay. So what Brian's pulling up right now is gonna be, there's materials in the notebook, that has our overview of the budget and the bank accounts. They're a little distorted because we have encumbered funds and we haven't received an appropriation for this fiscal year. So I think this will be a better summary of where we stand to date for, and I chose a starting point of the closeout of fiscal year 24-25. So it's a snapshot of looking at June 30th, 2025, where we are with what we had in the bank accounts and what our obligations are over that time period, which includes staff salaries and so forth. So hopefully we'll pull it up. Brilliant. Thank you. All right. So at the end of the fiscal year, it looks like we had a lot of money there of 1.3 million, and we have 3 accounts. As you know, the General Assembly provided the commission and other legislative agencies with a reserve account to use in this type of situation for a budgetary impasse. We also, on the second line there, have essentially leftover monies from our partnership with State University. As part of our MOU, we provide in-kind services of $225,000 a year to Penn State. We hire postdocs and graduate students and so forth. Ever since COVID, they've had a challenge to place students with us. There hasn't been as many incoming students in their cohorts, so currently we only have 1 postdoc. So typically at the end of the 5-year MOU, any monies that weren't spent that we've put aside for this partnership, the commission absorbs and utilizes, since we don't transfer funds to Penn State. Because of the budget situation, we're viewing that as monies that we can use even though the MOU is not expired. So we're not using future money, but money we didn't use for the first 3 years of our MOU. And finally, we have our JRI 2 funds that we've talked about many times about being earmarked for this next gen CASER redevelopment of the software that we heard earlier in the policy meeting. So we see 1.3 million. Okay, Ryan, next, please. Well, we've now come to present day and we haven't paid essentially salaries for June, July, or August yet to Penn State. So those are encumbered, plus our consultant who's working on that next gen project. So that's $650,000 of unpaid bills that we have to date. Go ahead, Ryan. And you could see that unpaid amount obviously exhausts our reserves if we were to use that as our first source of paying our bills. And so that leaves us with $700,000 today at the end of August in our bank accounts. And so I'll just also highlight again, I think we've talked about this many times, that the commission has tried to be proactive in regards to the commission's budget, not only for flat funding, but also with this idea of this potential budget impasse. So as I noted, we had 4 vacancies that we haven't filled that have been approved FTE on our roster. And we made a number of other cost-cutting measures, including eliminating the commission dinner for 3 of them, et cetera. And so we've tried our best to tighten our belt, but in most agencies, ours is no exception, the salaries are probably 85% of our expenditures. So we have very little room to tighten our belt. There's probably another 10% that are things like computers and contracts that we can eliminate to have general operations, including our MOU with Penn State that provides this building and this office. So that leaves very little for us to think about of how to offset any shortages. Okay, so I went through an exercise. Go ahead, Ryan. So we pay roughly $274,000 a month in expenditures. I based that estimate off of last year's expenditures that we utilized. So if the budgetary impasse continues, what we're faced with is roughly 2.5 months of operations. And again, unlike maybe the government work, we will have to shut the lights off and leave the building and we stop working as an agency. So I think it's really important just to highlight that. I know that discussions continue between legislative members to resolve the impasse, and we're not sure how long that will last, but it puts the commission in a very tenuous space. And I think that it's hard to even project for next year what the impact will be until we know what our appropriation will be, and we can have that discussion in December, assuming, of course, we receive an appropriation. But I think that I want to just highlight and thank the chair and thank the vice chair for continuing conversations and our other legislative members for considering what options are available for the commission. As noted, if we receive flat funding next year again, we're not going to have enough money to pay our bills to continue, and real implications will happen. And I'll just give an example. Well, the example, if we run out of money and we don't continue operations, that guideline sentencing form that we just mentioned and we talked a lot about, we won't have staff to support that. If there's a bug and that system goes down, judges will not receive the sentencing guideline form prior to sentencing. There's a lot of other things that will happen, but that's probably the most tangible piece, is that we will not be able to support one of our fundamental things, nonetheless, meet all the obligations that we have statutorily when we can operate. So I'm hoping that this is will be resolved and we'll move forward. In December, we could talk about where we sit after we receive our appropriation and see what funds we have. But clearly, we're diverting these funds that we've talked about earmarking for this next gen project to general operations, which may delay that project, et cetera. So with the support of the chair and the vice chair, we've been really trying to continue operations as best as we can, not limit travel and training, the trainings we provide in the field, and all the work that we do to support our stakeholders, with the hope that we'll be fiscally whole soon and then be able to move forward. So before I move past this issue related to the budget, if there's any comments from members or questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
I get just real quick, and not to go too deep into it, but is the issue like, is there federal funding that's not coming in, or what?
Well, it's just discussion on passing the budget. You know, our chambers.
The budget hasn't passed. Okay.
So thank you everyone for your patience.
We're gonna lock up Representative Patricia.
Yeah, it should not be bipartisan.
I have a question. Do we need as commission members to vote or have a motion to change all these fundings to keep everything going? Or you can do all that internally?
I believe that we can just use our accounts to pay our bills in the way we need to.
Okay.
I will
Thank you.
One other thing that Dr. Painter Davis and I have been discussing is the idea of reaching out and seeking federal funding through grants. So we could apply for a grant for project work. And I've mentioned this in the past, so we could receive, X amount of dollars, or several $100,000 to do a project. We would have to take staff, divert them to that work. So nothing comes for free. So we would need 2 FTE to work on this federal grant to get additional monies at the expense of working on our mandates. So there's a trade-off there. But we are thinking about pursuing external funding to help support the commission. But again, that means what wouldn't we be able to do because we have limited resources. So it's certainly something I'll continue to discuss with the commission over the next several months, and in December we can discuss as well. There's nothing guaranteed, of course, about writing a proposal to receive funding. Writing the proposal itself also takes staff time, but there are other avenues and options that we are pursuing through different partnerships to move forward. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on this?
What are your intentions when the budget is passed? Do you intend to backfill all these accounts?
It depends how much money we receive. So if we have the money to backfill them, I think in a perfect world, we would be able to refill the reserve account for next time there's an impasse. So the challenge would be if we don't, how many months of operation would we have next year if there was an impasse rather than that number? Is it 1 month or 0 months and we run out of money at the end of the fiscal year if there's a budgetary impasse? So I think we'll have clarity hopefully for the December meeting where we can talk about strategies for moving forward.
How many years has the funding been flat?
I think at least 7 years now.
Yeah, like 20.
So, and you know, we talked a lot about that, the expansion of roles and responsibilities and also the expansion of FTE to meet that. And then now we're, I guess, finally paying the price a little bit of that expansion and all of the duties we need to do. Okay, so having talked about our fiscal challenges, it seems odd to talk about a contract for consultants, but our next item is an action item to approve the service purchase contract with Carbon Creek. And as a reminder, when we conceptualized that JRI money, it was to hire consultants to work with our team in the building of the Commission Sentencing Record Exchange, our next gen application to replace the SGS Web. So we've had a series of these contracts now with a local company that I actually believe is centered here in Center County. And they've been doing phenomenal work. One of the nice things about these service purchase contracts, and I certainly take Professor Mystic weigh in shortly about this as well, is they are written, they're not fixed price contracts. So we're not entering a contract that says we have to pay them a certain amount of money. This is a request to approve a contract not to exceed $100,000 or up to not to exceed $100,000. If we get bad fiscal news, we obviously can terminate the work on that day that we need to terminate. But
It's a needs-based contract and it will be determined, any expenditures or indebtedness will be determined by the executive director and whatever work he asks the consultant to do. So if you don't ask, they don't have to do it and we don't have to pay for it. That's the bottom line.
But in the short run, they've been doing incredible amount of work for us and really supplementing the skills of our team and moving that forward. And you could see just the questions we're asking the group during the policy meeting is a reflection of the Christy and her team's progress on building that application. We're meeting challenges, getting answers about how we should code and define things. So it's really a necessary component of our progress on that application. So I will turn it to the chair to seek a motion.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the service purchase contract?
So moved.
By Judge Daly. Seconded by DA Bible. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Great, and I'll just officially read what's in the notebook. It's approval of the service purchase contract with Carbon Creek not to exceed $100,000 to provide application development services for the next gen CASER CSRE application. Okay, that wraps up the executive update. I'll turn it to Ryan now for his administrative and outreach, his brief administrative and outreach update.
Thanks. I wanted to focus on three things, which you see on the screen here. I'll give a brief overview of staff's engagement at the National Association of Sentencing Commission Conference that occurred over the summer. Talk briefly about some of our educational partnerships and then a review and a little bit of a reminder of where we stand with the annual report for 2024. What I wanted to say, at least for NASC, was when this conference occurred in August, we were in Madison, Wisconsin. The focus of my comments on this is to say that Pennsylvania, and you've heard Matt and others mention this during today's meeting, that we're looked at nationally as subject matter experts in the space of not only guidelines, but sentencing. And Matt sits as the vice president of the NASC Association. And we had numerous staff each year, but in particular this year, providing presentations to the conference. And I wanted to recognize that Brett was there and provided a presentation. Jordan, who's behind us here, also provided a presentation, and Bobby as well. But I also wanted to mention one of our partners in the room here, the Department of Corrections, a staff member from the Department of Corrections, Jim Stover, attended and did a wonderful job in his presentation on all things programming at the DOC. And I just wanted to recognize his efforts and sort of expanding the Pennsylvania family at the NAS conference beyond the Sentencing Commission. And just a quick overview, staff provided sessions on veterans, if you can believe that or not. We've been talking a lot about veterans, so it's timely for us to talk about that. Also, policy considerations in terms of the development of guidelines and analyzing the impact of those guidelines. And so we'll partner with some colleagues to do a joint session on that. And then thinking a little bit more broadly than simply sentencing guidelines, staff gave a plenary session on like thinking about punishment beyond sort of the criminal justice system and how you can use structured decision making in creating structured sentencing or punishment programs. And so it was a well-attended conference, and certainly Pennsylvania does a great job in supporting that annual effort each year. Moving on to educational partnerships, I think each meeting you hear me talk about these, but I'll just give you a quick update. We are at the beginning of both the fall semester for universities throughout the state. During the fall each year, the commission provides staff for a sentencing, correction, and sanctions class at Duquesne Law School. And that's through an existing MOU and a long-standing MOU that we've had with the law school. And so we appreciate Duquesne for giving the commission space to talk about guideline sentencing. As is typical, both fall and spring, commission staff teach an undergraduate course at Penn State University here on University Park, in things like sentencing, right? Staying in our lane. So that began, and staff are providing those educational opportunities to both undergraduate students and law school students. And this is just a note for the future, and through another existing MOU that we have with Villanova Law School. We are in the planning stages, building out for the Villanova Sentencing Workshop. I'll get the year wrong, but I think we're getting close to 25 years of this collaboration between AOPC, the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, the Villanova Law School, and the Commission on Sentencing in hosting this really unique sentencing workshop, both for law school students at Villanova, but also I think what's equally as important for practitioners, judges, district attorneys, defense attorneys, DOC and parole board staff or members to attend and discuss sentencing matters in a very unique way. And I know we had some members join us in this year, and so we appreciate that and hope you enjoyed your experience. The last thing that I'll mention is we continue to work on the 2024 annual report, and we will get back to this in earnest following the commission meeting. And we appreciate the discussion that we had earlier on conformity. We really wanted to have that moment to talk to members on how staff had been viewing that, because that's really going to help guide us in the text of the guideline and also in the presentation of the data tables for the 2024 annual report. It's a sort of a unique year in which we're splitting 7th edition and 8th edition. So I think we have a little bit of a nuanced way of managing that, but this is the cover. It's already designed. We just need to fill everything in between the cover and the back of the report. We'll be working on that to present to the commission or provide to the commission, I anticipate by the end of this calendar year. So with that, unless there's any questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to Bobby in the Education Outreach Unit, give his unit update.
Good morning, everyone. I will attempt to be brief so we can move on to a lot of the other stuff, but just to give you some of the highlights that we have from the Education Outreach Unit. First, I'd like to highlight the work of the unit. We've had 135 roll requests so far between January and the end of July, as I believe when we cut off the data. And we also have received 850 practitioner questions through that same time period. So not surprisingly, as we're working through 8th edition, we're seeing a steady flow of inquiries coming through. Also had 34 inmate requests and 2 right to know requests this year. As I've talked through at previous meetings, just to highlight some of the training resources we have available to everybody. our seminar schedule posted to our website. But I think I did mention before our last meeting in June, but I'll mention it again. We did add 2 new courses for practitioners. One related to offense gravity score, the other related to sentencing enhancements. Also kind of related to that, prior to those seminars going live in the summer, we also released some e-learning modules that were similarly focused on those topics. I think it's important for us as we're going through our educational offerings to everybody to try to meet the needs and offer fresh things for people to consume. So those have been added. We also recently did a e-learning module related to guidelines conformity. So as Brian mentioned earlier in the policy meeting, that was a point of emphasis. So we also pushed that out for practitioners to keep that fresh in their mind. Beyond those specific courses I mentioned, we do have our other recurring courses related to guidelines, sentencing basics. Those are split out. We have a SGS web overview that we're doing monthly. Then we have our legislative lunch and learn. Next month will be we have this month. So in a couple weeks, Brett will be giving us a nice data tour. And then next month will be our last for this calendar year. So we have that. And then we also have our ad hoc things, basic training academy, so on and so forth, that we are doing throughout the year. Thank you, though. I want to say thanks to the education and outreach staff. Jen, Tiffany, and Krista primarily are doing facilitation of a lot of the recurring seminars. So thank you to them for that. What I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, I'll be brief, is one of the larger projects that we've been working on in our education and outreach unit of late, and it's related to the reporting of resentences. So I just did a quick little timeline to give a little flavor. Back at the end of May, I worked with Brett and his unit in gathering some preliminary data related to resentencing submissions. As we've highlighted in previous meetings, we've done an exceptional job of receiving the reporting of sentences at 98% for our last year. One area for growth that we've identified as a commission is resentences. So in May, we reached out to chief probation officers and provided them with a raw number of resentences for their counties. We asked them to check their records management systems and say, hey, does this look like it would be a number you would expect to see from us? So what we've done during this early portion of the effort, May and June, was have that preliminary conversation. Midsummer, Brett was kind enough to provide us with an updated report with individual data for each county. So we then reached back out to the counties, provided those files just to help them narrow down and see if we're on the same ship, sailing down the seas together. And so through the end of August, I'll say, I had a conversation with about 47 of our counties already. So I think a really good early outreach effort and reaching a lot of our counties in a short period of time. So what the next steps are for us is Brian and I have been having discussions, and we're going to have some targeted meetings and conversations with counties. Well, we've picked a handful of counties, thinking through size, some large, some medium, some small, just to get a flavor of that information a little bit more focused for what we're looking to gather. And hopefully through that period of time, looking through fall, through the end of the winter, we can develop some best practices, what we're really asking of counties so that we can roll that out to counties more at large. So my goal is to have all of that done by the beginning of next year. So as we start with our annual verification process, we have a better roadmap and could really emphasize more the resentencing side of the house. And then, we'll see where we're at that point in time. But just wanted to provide you with a very high level and overview of what we're looking at for that project. Happy to answer any questions you might have on it. Any here. Who wants? I'll pass the baton. Thanks.
Great, so I'll kind of dovetail off. We've heard a bunch about these partnerships, and Ryan highlighted our educational partnerships. We also have some research partnerships. Historically, we've done work with Carnegie Mellon through a class that's offered at Carnegie Mellon called a system synthesis project. And basically they request from agencies a proposal for a project, and then students get to select if they want to be part of that project. So we as a commission have been engaged with Carnegie Mellon at least 10 times on these types of projects, and they've been really helpful in the examination of prior record score and the redevelopment of that for the 8th edition guidelines, for risk assessment, for some work we did in DUI. And we had a longstanding relationship with two professors there, one being Professor Al Bloomstein, who a while back was chair of the Sentencing Commission, and then his colleague Dan Nagin. Both those individuals are titans in the world of criminal justice research, maybe some of the best in the world at what they do, and we're really fortunate to be able to partner with them. So they reached out to us this year to ask if we had a project in mind, and we thought we would gave us an opportunity to be a little bit proactive on some potential work that we'd be receiving down the pipeline. So Representative Bonner has recently introduced legislation, House Bill 1454, on the development of guidelines for bail and pretrial release conditions. So we thought that this was a wonderful opportunity to provide data to Carnegie Mellon students. And these students are data scientists. They are not substantive experts on criminal justice, but they are able to build models to be thinking about predicting recidivism or predicting failure to appear at those initial hearings. So that is just kicked off and we're working with them, but there's been a new wrinkle that we're really excited about. And the second part of this is that through conversations with Professor Mystic, there's now another partnership, and we're working with some law students that Professor Mystic supervises at Duquesne University, who are going to provide that substantive and legal expertise to this project. So we're going to get a lot of background information if we were to receive the mandate to develop bail guidelines from his students on what's going on in other jurisdictions, what are the legal considerations surrounding this. So we're really excited about this new joint partnership between the Commission, Carnegie Mellon, and Duquesne on this, what seems to be a really timely topic, not just from the legislation, but in the Commonwealth in general, about what types of bail conditions are imposed and how they work related to recidivism and failure to appear. So, Professor, I don't know if you want to add to that.
It's a happy circumstance for us. I run a small clinic at the law school, and I always say I have 17 or 18 of the smartest people in the building in the clinic, and I was able to assign 2 of them to CMU, and it's a great opportunity for them to work with Professor Nagin, who, as you said, is a titan in the field. But at the same time, my law students will be making a criminal justice, criminal procedure presentation to the CMU students to make sure they're familiar with what goes on. And at the same time, we have made arrangements through the manager of our arraignment court to have the entire group, the CMU students and my students together attend arraignments in Allegheny County. So this will give them a pretty good start. So it's a great thing for us, and I think for the commission and for the study.
Yeah, and I think it will not be any final answer on the questions that are proposed potentially in the bill, but it will be a really nice foundation for us thinking about what data we will need to answer the question, how to conceptualize and arrange that data, and then of course preliminary recommendation from this really talented group of kids. They are beyond impressive in the product that they produce. So big thanks to our university partners for having this opportunity. With that, I'll turn it to Noah for the remaining report on our partnerships.
Thank you, Matt. First, I want to talk about our partnership with Penn State University and the Criminal Justice Research Center. First, we continue to work with faculty at the CJRC on a variety of projects. Most importantly, though, I want to talk about postdocs. We work with postdocs through our collaboration with CJRC, and the postdocs are central to the commission's work. For example, Nicholas Goldrosen, our current postdoctoral fellow, did a large amount of the writing and research on SR 196, and we are in the process of advertising for other postdoc positions who will be central to continuing to meet our legislative mandates. Also, our postdoctoral fellow, Nicholas Goldrosen, will be presenting research next week on SR 196 at the New York State's Division of Criminal Justice Series Public Safety Symposium. They are paying for his travel and for him to attend and speak at the conference. And the goal of the symposium is to convene police, prosecutors, community supervision, crime analysts, etc., to learn more about criminal justice practices in New York. And Nick will be there speaking about SR 196, and it's a good cross-state learning opportunity and for us to disseminate our work to other states. Another effort that the commission is working on is a research to practice sentencing symposium, which we are holding in October. Research practice partnerships in the field of criminal justice, they involve collaborations between researchers and practitioners that focus on problems of practice and attempt to improve outcomes, including reducing recidivism. In collaboration with CJRC, we are having a one-day symposium on this topic in October, and the event's going to bring together researchers and practitioners to explore how we can further build partnerships between universities, sentencing commissions, and state agencies that inform evidence-based practices. Last, as for other research partners, I want to note that commission staff were invited and attended a ceremony for a graduation from the Regional Veterans Treatment Court in Clearfield County on August 14th. We got to see the graduation of this, I think it was the second participant just graduated from that treatment court. And commission staff will be attending another graduation, and that were invited in Perry County for the Regional Veterans Treatment Court on September 25th, 2025. So those are the updates on our research partnerships. Matt, did you have anything to add to that?
Thanks, Noah. I'll just add, as we said, we get a tremendous amount of support from the students at Penn State, but we also want to, as Mr. Winiarowitz hinted at, of leveraging some of these professors to work with us as well. So Penn State, with their money, invited the commission to be part of this symposium, in fact, co-sponsors, but without any financial obligation. And they're going to be flying in a number of national experts from New Mexico and different locations to be thinking about how we can leverage that to provide expertise and extra manpower to the work that we do. And then we can provide them with opportunities for their research, but through this collaboration really benefit the Commonwealth. So we're quite excited about this upcoming symposium. And we also have folks from around the Commonwealth, from Drexel University, from folks from Allegheny, different folks across the Commonwealth that are attending as additional stakeholders and researchers. So with that, we'll turn it over to Christy Gundro for the application information technology update.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Still morning, 5 minutes. So I only have a few things to go over, a little bit on staffing, progress on our Next Gen initiative, and then some updates about our SGS web application. So just to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about when I throw out those terms, SGS web is our legacy software application. It's used by courts across the state to generate sentencing guidelines, which are used in the sentencing hearings. And then after a sentence imposed, it's used to collect that information about the sentence that's actually imposed, so that we could do all the research that we've been talking about today. And then our Next Gen initiative, because our enterprise initiative to basically modernize our technology portfolio. And right now we're currently focused on developing the CASER application. So CASER is going to eventually replace SGS Web, because SGS Web was developed over 20 years ago. It's very outdated. The technology it's built on is outdated, and it's just getting harder and harder to maintain. So In June, I do have a little staffing update. So in June, with the commission's approval, we did expand our contract with Carbon Creek to provide us with a second developer. That person joined our team in late June, and so far that's been going very well. So I appreciate the commission allowing us to continue that relationship with Carbon Creek by approving that service purchase contract earlier in the meeting. Part of the reason we wanted to bring that person on board is because we did have one of our staff members leave around that same time. So we do still have a vacancy in one of our permanent staff positions, which we're holding off on posting because of the uncertainties with the budget. The person who left was primarily responsible for supporting the legacy SGS web application. So since her departure, other members of the team have kind of been stepping over to cover her responsibilities. So I just wanted to recognize that effort. So far with the CASER project, we're still on time, although with the having to deal with her leaving in that vacant position, as well as we've seen a little bit of uptick in updates to the legacy application, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We are starting to see some impact to the CASER project timeline. However, before communicating a revised schedule, I just want to give a little more time to see how the project progresses with the new developer that we brought on board as he becomes more familiar with the system and settles into the work. So I'll be in a better position to provide an update on the timeline at our December commission meeting. Despite some of these challenges, the team does continue to deliver high quality work. So I'm really proud of the progress that we've made so far. Since our meeting in June, we've been mostly focused on this sentence submission process. Our key accomplishments during the past period has been completing the development of the sentence details page, the sentence sequence page, and the supplemental information page. And we hope to wrap up the rest of the sentence submission process in the coming month. So hopefully that's something else we might be able to showcase in December. And then even though we've been mostly focused on building new functionality, we are also continuously refining what we already have in place just by, we're incorporating feedback from our education and outreach unit who have been serving as our primary testers at this point. So we've done a host of things to improve what we kind of already developed and just needed to be tweaked here and there, but also add a couple of different functions that they pointed out were missing, like a bulk delete feature for offenses. We were displaying offense gravity score later in the process, and they thought we should be displaying it earlier in the process, and other changes like that. And then another significant effort that the team has been working on is perfecting the design of the sentencing guidelines form, which we reviewed in detail this morning during the policy meeting. So thanks again to the commission members who participated in those sessions and gave us the feedback. We received a lot of positive feedback on the design, but there were really helpful suggestions that we received during those sessions that we discussed earlier. If you want to see examples of the revised form, it is available in the supplemental materials notebook starting on page 12. And then while we work on the new application, as I mentioned, we continue to maintain the legacy application. We have been trying to limit changes to that just because we're trying to focus more on building the new application. And any changes we have to make to SGS Web requires us to shift staff away from the CASER project. However, as more and more cases are getting sentenced under the 8th edition guidelines, we're seeing kind of an increase in questions from users and issues that sometimes require attention. For example, we recently deployed the significant update to the 8th edition guideline conformity logic that we discussed this morning around the dispositional departures. Like that was a, pretty significant change to the application to implement that. That is really all I have to discuss today. So we continue to make progress on the CASER application while maintaining the legacy system. So I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any. Or if not, turn it over to.
All right, thank you, Christy. So I think I'll start with just a brief overview of the unit, and then we'll kind of revisit that risk discussion from earlier. So 2025 has been an especially busy year in the unit in terms of mandated projects. So we've had three pretty large scale projects that have all been mandated to be finished this year, taking up really the bulk of the staff time throughout 2025. So the first obviously is the veteran study, which we've heard a lot about today. Matt sent off the final report last week, so we can scratch that one off. And now I think the next steps are looking at disseminating some of those findings in different ways, including papers, snapshots, those kind of things. We'll talk more about the risk assessment validation in a minute, but just generally, if we have an assignment every 3 years with the risk assessment to go back and revalidate the model. So the model was implemented in 2020. I think we actually initially looked at it in 22. Didn't have a lot of data at that point. Now we're conducting our first full look behind the scenes of the risk assessment model. So that validation study is due this fall. I'm currently working on that report. Should be finished up later this fall. And then obviously I already give a brief overview of the short sentence parole evaluation. This is our second in 3 years for the program. This report also is ongoing and we've got a due date, I think, in November. So it's been a busy year, busy fall, but I think getting close to getting a bunch of these mandated projects wrapped up. And then in addition to those, we've also been doing continuing a lot of partnership with the parole board. Matt and I have had the chance to attend each of the last 2 or 3 parole board retreats and had some chances to present on the guidelines to board members and to hearing examiners. And we've also added in some additional reporting that we're doing on the guidelines, specifically individual reports for decision makers. So we've created annual individual reports for each board member. And now we're also doing the same for each of the 25 or 30 hearing examiners. So we'll be presenting those for the first time later this month at the next parole board retreat. So we just talked about the CMU capstone project. I think this is like the 9th time we've participated in this project with CMU. It's always interesting and exciting to work with the students. They're super talented every time. But we just had our first kickoff meeting yesterday, I think, and then our official project kickoff will be tomorrow for that project. Then in addition to all these projects, we continue to provide data sets and customized data reports upon request. So in the last quarter, we sent data to RTI International, the ACLU, researchers at Penn State, PCCD, Spotlight PA. So just a kind of a wide variety of academia, the legislature, and media requests. So every quarter we probably go through, we fulfill about a dozen of those every quarter. So that keeps us busy too. Otherwise, I think that's the general overview for the unit. Just any questions?
The question, if you're able to share for Spotlight PA, what information did they request?
I could share it with you on request. Yeah, actually I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'd have to go back and.
All right. Yeah. I'd be curious.
Yeah.
Was it afterwards?
I think that's what it was. I think it was a request on drug deliveries resulting in death, kind of looking at how frequent that occurs, looking over the past 20 years or so.
Drug deliveries have results in death.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll queue up the risk assessment piece and just as a reminder, again, this is like more of a statistical thing where we're validating the model, which for me means, is it working the way it was designed to work? And this tool was designed to predict recidivism. So not how it's being used in the field and being implemented, and not necessarily like under the hood of every component and the weighting. It's overall how it does in practice. So with that, I'll turn it to Brett again.
All right, thank you, Matt. So like Matt just said, this is a little bit different than what we've talked about with risk over the last couple of years. We've done a few different presentations at other commission meetings. talking more about the implementation side and how that's going with judges and presenting information on the risk assessments. This time around, we're actually going to the model itself. Like Matt said, not exactly reinventing the model, but going back and looking at the model originally was validated on data from 2004 to 2006. So now we're getting some more recent data and seeing, is the model as predictive now as it was with that original data? And then also, are we continuing to have a model that minimizes any bias as much as possible? So that's kind of what we'll be looking at. And before we get to that, I'll go through a little history and background of the development process of the model, how we landed on the structure of the model. And then once I go through that history, I'll pass it over to Jordan, who's our senior statistician. He'll go through some of the actual statistical work that he took care of to validate the model. We initially got this mandate to produce a risk assessment back in 2010. And the model was implemented in 2020. So this was a 10-year development life cycle before we got this model finalized. But essentially the model is designed to be used at the time of sentencing to be an indicator to the judge, not necessarily how to sentence, but do I need additional information before imposing a sentence? With the idea, especially on the low risk end, is this person a good candidate for alternative sentencing like triple RI or intermediate punishment programs? And then also, if in a more serious case, are they a good candidate for one of the programs at VOC, whether that's short sentence parole, state drug treatment, et cetera. So just a little bit about how the tool was developed. Initially, commission staff back in 2010 took a look at a lot of existing risk assessments, because there's a lot of them out there for general recidivism. But ultimately, they decided it made more sense to design a new custom tool that's a little more specific to the considerations at the time of sentencing, especially in Pennsylvania. So you could validate this model on Pennsylvania rather than just generic data that was validated somewhere else. So over the course of these 10 years, the staff developed several iterations of proposed models. But initially, the models based on every OGS score. So we had 14 OGS points. There were 14 different risk models. That was kind of the initial proposal. As we came up with these proposals, we had several public hearings, updates at quarterly commission meetings, dozens of interim reports, and in all, 19 public hearings were held. So as we went through each of these, it was an iterative process where we kind of took the feedback that we were hearing from the public, from commission members, and made adjustments along the way. And I'd say that the two key themes that we heard through that whole 10 years, the two main concerns were, number one, is this model going to be biased against any groups, whether that's racial, gender? Can we ensure that we have a fair model? Number two was the idea of labeling someone as being high risk, and then or low risk, typical risk, but then that label of their risk level following along with them over time, even as they move past this current case, will that label of high risk follow them? So that was a major concern we heard from the public too. So over the course of all these conversations, we made several adjustments. The scales themselves, we moved from an OGS specific scale to just one single scale that would apply to everyone. We removed certain factors and changed other ones. So we got rid of things like county of residence, prior record score, and we switched from using any prior arrest to now we use only prior convictions. And then finally, in terms of the labeling aspect, rather than sharing with the judge that this person is low risk, high risk, et cetera, now we just, in the cases of low risk or high risk, we share a recommendation from the judge to get additional information. And that additional information could be, PSIs, risks, needs, responsivity assessments, things of that nature. Then finally, after all of these public hearings and conversations, we landed on our final current model in 2020. It became effective June 1st, 2020. And sort of on the inside, the model itself is determining low, typical, high risk for an individual. And then on the actual implementation side, like I said, we're just supplying the judge with the recommendation to receive additional information or not. The final model is an 18-point scale. Again, like I said, classifies individuals as low, typical, and high. That information is not shared. But it's essentially the final model is based on a series of factors, including age and gender, but also it's including, most importantly, the number and type of prior convictions, and the number and type of prior juvenile adjudications. And so that brings us to present day, where the model's been in use for about 5 years now. And so this is kind of our first look under the hood, make sure that the actual statistical model is still predictive of recidivism. So I'll pass it off to Jordan to take it from here.
I'll stand, I guess. So Brett outlined sort of the history of the tool and the adoption of it. I'm going to cover our recent efforts to revalidate the instrument. It's important to revalidate this instrument, not just because we're required to, but also to make sure that it remains free from bias and predictive of the outcome recidivism that we hope. Sometimes we think about revalidating these tools, we're talking about taking a tool from another jurisdiction and making sure it's valid in Pennsylvania. In this case, we're taking the tool that we created with the older data, 2004 to 2006, and using data from 2015 to 2016 to make sure that it is still predictive. We would have liked to have used more recent data, but because our outcome is recidivism and we want to include individuals who receive state confinement sentences, we sort of have to use data that's a little bit older so that we can track individuals for 3 years. I think in total, we're able to include 97% of the people that are sentenced in 2015 to 2016. The analyses that I'm going to present today are just a summary, a subset of what's going to be in the full written report. And they'll focus on comparing the risk and recidivism distributions, so across the risk category and the risk score. What did it look like in the original sample? What does it look like in the 2015 and 2016 validation? We'll look at the accuracy of the scale as a whole, and then we'll look at the accuracy of the scale for white and black individuals separately. And we focus on white and black only because we don't have sufficient numbers of individuals from other races to compare and to be consistent with what was presented for the original model. So our first slide here looks at the distribution of individuals across different risk scores. As Brett said, it ranges from 0 to 18. On the left, we have the original distribution, and on the right, we have our revalidation distribution. The shaded cells, rows there in the middle, are typical risk. And I'll draw your attention to a few relationships here. First is the total across the bottom. You can see with the original sample, we had more people than we do in the revalidation sample, reflecting that it was based on 3 years of data and not 2, but that the percent of individuals that recidivate in the sample as a whole is identical. It's 33% overall. If we look at a couple of individual scores here now, we can start with risk score 4 that's highlighted. We can see that the percent of individuals that recidivate in the original sample and the revalidation sample are very similar, and that all of the risk scores that are lower than risk score 4 have lower recidivism rates. So just highlighting the similarity between the distributions, and that recidivism is related to the risk score that somebody receives.
Hey, Jordan, can you just define recidivism really quick for that?
Sure. In our sample, the original risk sample, recidivism is the original risk instrument. The recidivism is defined as a rearrest leading to a conviction. So it's essentially a conviction within 3 years.
So any new arrest within 3 years leading to a conviction. So the arrest has to occur within the 3 years, the conviction could occur after. We want to accommodate for the court time, if you would.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Not, they're paroled and then they commit another crime 8 years later, that's still included in recidivism? No.
It is not.
Okay.
And so why it's important with what Jordan mentioned about the confinement time. So if a person was sentenced to state confinement in 2015 for a minimum sentence of 4 years, then they'd be released in 19. We would track them then for the 3 years that they were out for a new arrest and see if they led to a conviction. So that would be our, that person would be included in our sample, and then we would say yes or no to the recidivism.
Okay.
And that's, the definition now is based on the definition that was used to construct, it's the same definition, right? To construct the instrument back in whatever year, 2010 to 2019.
Okay, so we looked at risk score 4, that's a low risk. If we were to look at risk score 8, which is typical risk, there would be no recommendation made for someone with a risk score of 8, but we see the same relationship that recidivism is similar in the original sample with 39% and 37% of the revalidation sample. And then if we just look at a high risk score 12, again, same overall relationship, 56% recidivism rate in the original sample, 54% in the revalidation sample. So this is really just highlighting that the recidivism behavior at a given risk score is similar, and that the risk score itself is related to real differences in recidivism. So this is what we would hope to see to suggest that the tool is working as intended. And this slide highlights that relationship in the revalidation sample that I just discussed. That sort of this stair-stepping approach where each next risk score that's higher has a higher recidivism rate. This slide focuses on more of how the tool is actually making recommendations in practice. So if we look at the categorical risk at the top, focusing on that table, we can see that in the original sample on the left, the distribution of individuals that is low risk, as well as in the revalidation sample, is very similar. It's 18% low risk in the original and 15% in the revalidation. The recidivism rate is identical at low risk at 15%. If we look at the other end, high risk, again, we see similarity, 5% of the original sample compared to 6% of the revalidation, and similarity in the recidivism rates, 58% versus 56%. The bottom bar chart there is just highlighting that relationship visually. So the orange bars are the original sample and the blue are the revalidation. So as a whole, both risk score and risk category are related to recidivism, and the recidivism behavior within a given risk score or risk category is similar in the original sample as well as the revalidation sample. So the next metric that we'll look at is sort of the overall accuracy of the scale. And there's a few different accuracy measures you could look at. The most common here is what we present, the area under the curve, or the AUC, which measures the tool's overall predictive validity. The definition of it is outlined up there. It's really the interpretation of the AUC value, which is if you were to randomly select an individual that recidivates and does not recidivate, the AUC value is the probability that the randomly selected recidivist would have a higher risk score than the randomly selected non-recidivist. The two curves for the original and the revalidation sample are at the bottom of the slide here. The original is on the left and the revalidation is the red on the right. Visually, we can look at them. They sort of pass the eye test. They look the same. And then our visual assessment is confirmed when we look at the actual AUC value, which 0.66 in the original, 0.65 with the revalidation. And we want to highlight that overall, these numbers compare very favorably to other instruments, and many times higher than other instruments that are used to predict this. And that in the statistical literature, this aligns with what would be considered a moderate to strong predictive ability of the instrument. So the final element of the revalidation that we'll look at today is the racial impact. So we'll look at the accuracy of the scale for white and Black individuals separately. In this case, it'll be the AUC curves. If you look at the curves, they're overlaid on top of each other there. Visually, we can see that they're a very similar shape. The red line is for white individuals and the blue line is for Black individuals. So they have a similar shape. And again, the AUC values themselves are similar as well. This is just one of several racial impact analyses that we'll include with the final report. All of the others, like this one, suggest no difference in the tool's predictive ability or the relationship between the risk classification and recidivism for white and Black individuals. So just to wrap things up here, the written report, as based on the evidence that we presented here today, is going to conclude that the instrument remains valid. And as Matt's mentioned a few times already, it's important to keep in mind that we didn't look at the individual factors. We didn't try to recreate the tool with new data. Had we seen significant differences, we might have investigated some of those relationships, but based on what we did see, there's no cause for significant revision right now.
All right, thanks, Jordan. So with that, I think we can open up to some discussion.
Yeah, just a question about some of the data and just honestly, just around curiosity. So the AUC number, that's basically like a percentage. So it's like 66% likely that the risk assessment tool, that someone based on the tool that would recidivate compared to someone who's considered to not recidivate, right?
Not exactly. So it's not exactly a prediction of recidivism. It's more of a prediction of someone who recidivates versus doesn't recidivate. What's the probability that the recidivant has a higher score?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a perfect model, they would always have a higher score.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there any correlation? I mean, I just noticed it because if you go back to the slide that had the breakdown between low, typical, and high. Yeah, that one. So it's interesting that that AUC number was like 66. And then if you look at this, the typical range, the recidivism rate is like 30, it's like 33, 35%. Is there any correlation? I just find it interesting that those add up to like.
Yeah, not really.
Maybe maybe I'm like looking for signals that aren't there.
So the AUC is the model's ability to distinguish between recidivists and non-recidivists. So it's not the same as the rate of predicting recidivism.
That was just a coincidence.
But what I will say is, Jordan also ran positive predictive values, negative predictive values, Black and white. And back in our original model, there was a little bit of discrepancy there between Black and white. But in our new data, like that gap has closed completely. There's no difference using the newer data between the positive predictive value or negative of the model. So it looks like, I mean, obviously that's good news that difference has closed up completely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then just while we're here, so that's what I'm understanding this graph correctly. So what this is saying though is someone who is in the typical range of risk classification. Essentially, there's like a 35% chance that they would recidivate based on that score. Is that things?
Yeah, so that, again, that's being rearrested within 3 years of being at liberty. So if you had a jail sentence, that's not counting the time you were confined. And once you're at liberty, it's being rearrested within 3 years, and that arrest leading to a conviction.
Okay, thank you.
And it is counting the time if you were on probation for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think in a nutshell, and I told you there's gonna be a little more math involved in this, is this tool was designed to say additional information prior to sentencing will create potentially better sentences. So we know that PSIs are ordered around the Commonwealth at varying rates, and we're not exactly sure why. And this is suggesting that additional information only be requested in PSI, as Brett said, as risk needs responsivity tools for that 18 or roughly 21% of the individuals. So it's giving guidance to the judge to request additional information, be good stewards of resources by using probation time to collect this information. In the cases that we know empirically through evidence-based practices will have the most impact, low or high risk, as Brett indicated, that additional information, that these alternative sentences, we know, for example, like treatment courts do best for high risk and high need people. So if we can identify that by already suggesting maybe these are good candidates, let's now get information about their needs, then we could select people for treatment courts based on evidence-based. So in a nutshell, then the tool is doing what it was designed to do, which is distinguish between low, typical, and high risk people. And working that way in practice, how it's being used by judges in the field, we know maybe is slightly different, that they're not necessarily heeding the advice of the recommendation. Now it is advisory and voluntary recommendation, so there's no mandate to follow that recommendation. But the commission has talked a lot about outreach efforts and continuing. Christy and Ryan, way back at the beginning of the policy meeting, highlighted how our new form really showcases that on the left side. So there'll be other opportunities for us to talk to judicial decision makers about the purpose of the risk tool, what the recommendation is suggesting, and then how to use that in their jurisdictions.
If we take any looks at what other risk tools have developed in the last few years and whether they're better than the one we're using. I know there was significant controversy when we adopted ours, and frankly, I think it was watered down dramatically based on what the science supposedly told us. But are there other newer tools out there that maybe we should be looking at?
There's a series of traditional recidivism models that are out there. Those, in terms of performance, are right in the range of our model. So our model does pretty well in terms of the traditional assessments. I know DOC is doing a lot of work to develop, kind of a more modern approach to risk assessment. So I think maybe it's yet to be seen how that works. I think it's still in the validation phase right now.
Right. And I would say one of the things, if you could go, Brett, to the one that shows the tool itself, the instrument. There may be the chairman mentioned artificial intelligence or something called machine learning, and you remember the controversy surrounding that. What really distinguishes our tool is the transparency of how it's scored. So this idea of the black box, which was a lot of criticism of machine learning in different styles, is you don't know how the factors are weighted in the prediction for a particular individual. This is extremely transparent, and as Brett says, the tool does remarkably well compared to other tools. We could probably get slightly better predictions, and this goes back. We worked with a professor at the University of Pennsylvania whose whole thing was if you put things into the model, the whole goal was to get better predictions. Hat size, shoe size, favorite color. If that helps you predict recidivism, throw it in there, even if there's no theory, because he was about predictions. So our tool, by being transparent and restricted really to offender and offense characteristics, I think was fitted our needs the best and continues to fit our needs the best. So we could do some other things to get slight improvements, but at a huge cost, I think, in terms of transparency.
And I think also the other thing about the tools that say DOC and the board are now looking at, there's gonna be information that are plugged into those tools that you're not gonna have at the point that you're starting to develop this tool. So I think this is probably, I mean, this seems like it's as good as you can possibly do based on the information you have.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts on this or the entire research portfolio that Brett mentions? Okay, we have it on the agenda. There's really not a lot of policy updates to provide beyond what we had in our policy meeting. There's some materials in your supplemental notebook about our legislative tracking and our case law tracking. So I'll just move to the final thing on my agenda and then turn it back to the chair. Is just a reminder that we're working on the appointments. And so in December, the new appointments, the new term for members will start on October 1st. So we'll have a new commission in December. Ryan and I are meeting with the two new members that I referenced earlier to provide orientation. If we have other new members appointed, we'll be hosting orientations prior to that December meeting. Our next meeting then is Thursday, December 4th, and we'll most likely go back to the other model where we just have one consolidated meeting. Information about that will be provided unless there's some huge policy consideration. And hopefully we'll have a budget by then to be excited about and to discuss as well. So before I turn to the chair to adjourn, any other comments, questions, considerations?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So we're thinking.
By Judge Marsko, second. Fox. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Semester.